They called my name into a microphone I could barely hear over the applause. And in that moment, I understood something I had been trying not to know for most of my life. Achievement does not guarantee presence. I was about to become the first person in my family to earn a doctoral degree, and the seats that were supposed to belong to my parents were still empty. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team of the channel Revenge Sins, inspired by real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotion, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. I am Margot Sinclair. At the time, I was in my early 30s, standing in a rented gown that felt heavier than it should have, waiting for a ceremony I had been told not to make a big deal out of. If this story feels familiar as you listen, stay with me. Sometimes the quiet stories are the ones that explain the most. I had spent 6 years earning my PsyD in clinical psychology. 6 years of rotations, unpaid internships, overnight crisis calls, and learning how to sit with other people's pain without flinching. Every hard day, every moment I wanted to quit, I told myself the same thing. They'll be there when it matters. That belief carried me through more nights than caffeine ever did. My parents had always described me as independent, strong, low maintenance. Those words sounded like compliments until I realized they were permissions. Permissions to forget me. Permissions to assume I would adapt. Permissions to put me second and trust I would never complain. My younger brother, Julian, had never been described that way. Julian was ambitious. Julian was social. Julian needed support. Julian's life came with events that required attendance. Mine came with understanding. The morning of my graduation, my phone was silent. No excited texts. No, we're on our way. I told myself they were driving, probably arguing about directions, probably late the way they always were. I stood in my apartment, adjusting my collar, rehearsing how it would feel to hear my name announced with the title I had earned, Dr. Margot Sinclair. I imagined my mother crying in the front row. I imagined my father clapping a little too loudly. I imagined Julian pretending not to care while secretly recording the moment on his phone. I had imagined this version of them for years. It was the version I kept alive so the work felt worth it. When my phone finally rang, I smiled before I answered. "Hey," I said. "Are you guys close parking's supposed to be rough?" There was a pause. Not a connection pause. A choice pause. "Sweetheart," my mother said, her voice already defensive. "We need to talk for a second." That was when the room shifted, not dramatically, quietly, the way it always had. Before she could continue, I sat down on the edge of my bed, the gown pooling around my feet, and listened. I listened the way I always had, the way children listen when they already know they are about to be asked to understand something that should never have needed explaining. "Margot," my mother said again, slower this time, as if adjusting her tone might soften the message. We mixed things up. I didn't answer right away. I was watching my own reflection in the mirror, the black gown hanging open, the collar slightly crooked. I had ironed it twice. I wanted nothing about this day to look careless. Mixed what up, I asked. She exhaled. "Your brother's event is today." I closed my eyes. "Julian's event." "Yes," she said quickly. "The client appreciation thing. The one we told you about weeks ago. You remember, people already confirmed. I tried to keep my voice steady. My graduation has been on the calendar for over a year." "We know," she said, and I could hear the irritation creeping in. "But this is different. These are his clients. This affects his work." I stood up. The gown slid off my shoulders and pooled at my ankles. "So you're not coming?" There it was. Silence again. Heavier this time. "We can celebrate later," she said. "Next weekend. We'll all dress up. We'll take photos with your diploma. It'll be just as nice." "It won't." I said, "This isn't dinner. This is the ceremony." From somewhere in the background, I heard my father's voice. Give me the phone. A second later, he was on the line. His voice was calm, almost bored, the way it always got when he thought I was being unreasonable. Margot, he said, don't do this. Do what I asked. Turn this into something it doesn't need to be. He said, you already did the hard part. The degree is earned. This is just a formality. I laughed once, short and sharp. You're calling the one day I walk across that stage a formality. Yes, he said without hesitation. That's exactly what I'm saying. My hand tightened around the phone. You're choosing his event over my graduation. We're choosing what makes sense, he replied. People are expecting us. Julian needs us there. And I don't. I said, that's not fair. My mother cut in. You know that's not what we mean. It's exactly what you mean. I said, you just don't like how it sounds. My father sighed, the familiar sound of finality. Margot, don't be dramatic. It's just a ceremony. Something inside me went still, not broken, not angry, just quiet. Okay, I said. Okay, my mother repeated. Have fun today. I said, I'll see you when you decide my life is worth scheduling around. Don't talk like that, she said. Send us pictures. We want to see you walk. I ended the call before she could say anything else. For a long moment, I stood there holding my phone, listening to the silence it left behind. Then I stepped back into the gown, smoothed the fabric, and looked at myself again. They weren't coming, but I was. The drive to campus felt longer than it should have. Every red light gave my mind another second to replay my father's voice, calm and dismissive, as if he had been discussing weather instead of absence. It's just a ceremony. I parked where the attendant pointed, nodded when he congratulated me, and walked toward the building with my head held steady. Families passed me in clusters, parents adjusting collars, mothers fixing stray hairs, fathers carrying flowers they looked faintly embarrassed to hold. No one looked at me twice. There was nothing about being alone that drew attention. That was the problem. Inside, an usher checked my name and gestured me toward the graduate seating area. I found my assigned row and stopped. 2 chairs beside mine were marked reserved. My parents' names were printed neatly on the cards. Someone had planned for them to be there. I sat down anyway. The woman next to me smiled. My parents got lost twice, she whispered. They'll show up eventually. I smiled back. Mine won't. She hesitated, unsure whether to apologize or pretend she hadn't heard me. I spared her the effort by looking forward. As we waited for the ceremony to begin, my phone buzzed once. A text from my mother. We really are proud of you. I stared at the words. Proud enough to say it. Not proud enough to show it. Another message followed. Your father worked really hard to make today successful for Julian. I typed, then erased, then locked my screen. There was nothing left to explain. They understood perfectly. They always had. The dean stepped to the podium and welcomed everyone. The crowd responded with the kind of applause that comes from relief, not excitement. This part was expected. The speeches followed, each one praising dedication, sacrifice, resilience. I listened the way I had learned to listen in therapy sessions, detached but attentive, storing phrases without letting them touch me. When they asked us to stand and turn toward our families, the room shifted, phones rose, names were shouted. Someone a few rows back screamed until her voice cracked. I stood. I turned. The reserved seats beside me were empty, not temporarily, not late, empty in a way that felt deliberate. I raised my hand halfway, then lowered it. No one noticed. The woman beside me waved hard enough for both of us. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a photo. Julian had sent it to the family group chat. My parents stood behind a long table, wine glasses raised, smiling at someone just out of frame. Wish you were here. The caption read, I checked the time, It was the exact minute our row was being instructed to line up. My name was called not long after. Dr. Margot Sinclair? I walked forward. I shook the dean's hand. I smiled when the camera pointed my way. I accepted the diploma case and stepped off the stage without slowing down. Applause filled the room, not for me specifically, for the idea of achievement, for the concept of family support. Back in my seat, I sat very still. I did not cry. I did not feel embarrassed. What I felt was clarity. They had not forgotten. They had chosen. And for the first time, I stopped making excuses for what that choice meant. After the ceremony ended, the graduates poured into the open space outside the hall, drawn toward voices that already knew their names. Parents called out, arms open, cameras flashed. People laughed too loudly, cried without shame. I stepped to the side, diploma case tucked under my arm, and pretended to read messages that were not there. A woman about my mother's age stopped in front of me. She was holding a bouquet that looked hastily arranged, the stems uneven. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Would you like me to take a picture of you with your family?" I met her eyes. "It's just me." Her smile faltered, then softened into something else. "Then I'll take one of you," she said. "This is a big day." She took my phone, waited for me to nod, and snapped a few photos. When she handed it back, she said, "Congratulations, Doctor." She said it like she meant it. I thanked her and watched her rejoin a group that wrapped around her like a shield. I stayed where I was. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother calling. I let it ring until it stopped. A text followed. "Where did you post those pictures?" Another came right after. "Your aunt just called me." I typed back before I could overthink it. I posted the truth. The reply was immediate. "Why would you do that? Because I was tired of pretending," I thought. Instead, I wrote nothing. Julian texted next. "You didn't have to do it like that," like what I replied. "Public," he said. "Dad's furious." I stared at his name on the screen. "You sent me a photo while I was walking across the stage." There was a pause, longer than before. "I thought you'd find it funny." He finally wrote, "You thought wrong." I sent back. Another message appeared, this time from my mother. "We said we would celebrate later. Why are you making this dramatic that word again?" That word. Dramatic. The family's favorite way to end a conversation without resolving it. I typed slowly. "You chose a business event over my graduation." "That's not fair." She replied, "We support you." Support isn't theoretical. I wrote, "It's showing up." My father joined the thread. "You're embarrassing us." I read that sentence twice. Not sorry. Not regret. Embarrassment. "I didn't embarrass you." I wrote back, "I stopped covering for you." No one replied after that. I slipped my phone into my bag and walked away from the crowd. The noise faded behind me, replaced by something quieter. Not peace. Not relief. Just space. The seats that had been empty were no longer my focus. What mattered was what had finally filled that space instead. I was done waiting for people who had already decided how much I was worth. I didn't go home after the ceremony. I drove until the traffic thinned and pulled into a quiet lot near campus. Engine still running, phone resting in my lap. The silence inside the car felt earned. I let it sit there with me. My phone buzzed again. Julian. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it would be. He never sent anything without an audience in mind. When I finally tapped the screen, the image filled it instantly. A long table covered in food, wine glasses raised mid-toast, my parents standing close together, relaxed, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. They looked present. They looked proud. The caption read, "Wish you were here." I checked the timestamp without thinking. It was the same minute my name had been called. The same minute the dean had shaken my hand. The same minute the camera had searched the crowd for a family that wasn't there. I locked my phone and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. My breath came out slow and controlled, the way I taught patients to breathe through panic. This wasn't panic. This was precision. When I got home, I hung the gown over the back of a chair. I didn't rush. I didn't collapse. I took a shower, changed into clean clothes, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I uploaded one of the photos the woman had taken for me. No filters, no dramatic caption. First doctor in the family. I wrote, "My parents couldn't make it. They chose a business event instead." I hit post. The responses came quickly. Former classmates, a professor who had supervised one of my rotations, a few friends who had watched me drag myself through years of training. My parents' names never appeared. An hour later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Then my mother again. Julian texted, "People are asking questions." "They should." I replied, "You're hurting Mom." He wrote, "She's crying." I stared at that line longer than the others. She wasn't crying when she skipped my graduation. He didn't respond. Another message came through from my mother. "Take it down," I typed back. "No, you don't understand what you're doing." She replied, "This affects all of us." It already did. I wrote, "Just not you." My phone rang again. I turned it face down on the table and let it buzz itself quiet. For years. I had adjusted my volume so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. I had swallowed disappointment and called it maturity. I had accepted absence and labeled it independence. Tonight, I didn't do any of that. I closed my laptop and sat there, hands folded, listening to the quiet I had finally chosen. The messages didn't stop overnight. They slowed, then returned in waves, each one carrying the same demand dressed in different words. My mother wrote first the next morning. "We didn't mean for it to hurt you." I stared at the sentence while my coffee went cold. "Meaning to or not doesn't change the result." I typed back. My father followed an hour later. "You're acting like we abandoned you." "You did," I replied. That was when the tone changed. "That's not fair," he wrote. "We have supported you your entire life." Supported. The word sat between us like a shield. "You paid bills." I typed. "You didn't show up." My mother jumped back in. "You always do this. You take things personally. You always do this." I wrote back. "You minimize things that cost you nothing." There was a pause. Then the word appeared again, as predictably as a reflex. "You're being dramatic." I set my phone down and pressed my fingers into my temples. That word had followed me through childhood like a warning label. Don't be dramatic when I cried after they left early. Don't be dramatic when my brother's schedule mattered more. Don't be dramatic when my achievements were inconvenient. It wasn't meant to calm me. It was meant to stop me. Julian called mid-morning. I answered this time. "You've made your point," he said without greeting. "You don't need to keep punishing them." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm telling the truth. You could have told it privately." "I did," I said. "For years." He exhaled sharply. "Dad says you're trying to humiliate the family." "I didn't put them in an empty seat," I said. "They did. That's not how it looks." "I don't care how it looks," I said. "I care how it felt." Silence filled the line. When he spoke again, his voice was tight. "You've changed." "I had to," I said. The version of me that kept understanding was disappearing. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and opened the group chat again. I scrolled past birthdays I had celebrated alone, congratulations that came late, apologies that never arrived. Patterns don't announce themselves. They accumulate. This wasn't about one ceremony. It was about a lifetime of moments that were always just slightly less important than someone else's. By afternoon, my mother sent one final message. "Let's all calm down and talk next week." I didn't answer. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the right explanation to make their choices hurt less. I wasn't hoping for a sentence that would fix the past. I wasn't trying to translate neglect into something kinder. What they did was clear. What it meant was clear. And once I stopped pretending it was accidental, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I didn't tell my parents I was changing my name. I didn't warn them. I didn't ask how they felt about it. I learned, finally, that advance notice only gave them time to argue me out of myself. I filled out the paperwork alone at my kitchen table. Name change petition. Reason personal. That single word felt honest enough. When the confirmation email arrived, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "We should talk." I didn't answer. The hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later at the county courthouse. The room was small, functional, stripped of ceremony. A few people sat waiting their turn, flipping through folders, rehearsing explanations no one really wanted to hear. When my name was called, I stood. "State your current legal name." The judge said, "Margot Sinclair?" I replied, "And the name you are requesting, Margot Ellis." The judge looked down at the file, then back up at me. "Reason for the change, I'm aligning my legal identity with the life I'm building." I said, "The name I'm leaving behind carries expectations I was never allowed to meet." He studied me for a moment, long enough to decide whether this was about debt, evasion, or impulse. "You're not avoiding financial obligations or criminal matters." "No," I said, "I'm choosing continuity." He nodded once. Petition granted. That was it. No speech, no applause. Just a stamp and a signature. On the steps outside, I stood still for a second and let the weight of it settle. I wasn't erasing my past. I was naming my future. That evening, I mailed certified letters to my parents and to Julian. The language was formal, effective immediately. "I will be legally known as Dr. Margot Ellis. Please update your records accordingly." No explanation, no justification. Julian called within the hour. "You're serious," he said. "I wouldn't have gone to court if I wasn't." I replied, "This is extreme." What was extreme? I said, was expecting me to keep carrying a name that came with conditions. "You're doing this to hurt them. I'm doing this to stop hurting myself." He scoffed. "You think changing your name fixes everything." "No," I said. "It fixes one thing." "And what's that?" "It makes it clear who I belong to." He hung up without saying goodbye. My parents didn't call. They texted instead. "This feels like a rejection." I read it once, then typed back. "It's a boundary. You're still our daughter." My mother replied, "I always was." I wrote, "You just didn't act like it." There was no response after that. I updated my professional registration the next morning. Dr. Margot Ellis appeared on the screen, clean and unburdened. I said it out loud once, just to hear how it sounded. It didn't feel like becoming someone else. It felt like coming home to myself, without asking permission. I moved to Fort Collins with everything that mattered fitting into my car. Books, files, clothes. The rest stayed behind without ceremony. Distance wasn't the point. Autonomy was. The clinic where I started working was smaller than any place I had trained. Fewer resources, longer hours. Patients who arrived already convinced no one would believe them. On my first day, the director shook my hand and said, "We don't pay well. We don't fix everything, but we show up." I nodded. "That works for me." My supervisor, Dr. Henry Lawson, was in his late 50s. Quiet, with a way of listening that made silence feel useful instead of awkward. After a session that ran long with a teenage girl whose parents kept missing appointments, he leaned back in his chair and said, "They always say they're doing their best." "They always do," I replied. "And the kids always blame themselves." He said. I didn't answer right away. Weeks passed, then months. My parents didn't call. Julian sent one message about logistics, nothing else. My phone stayed quiet in a way that felt intentional on both sides. One night, after a difficult shift, I opened my laptop and started writing, not as Margot Ellis, just as someone who had learned certain patterns too well. I wrote about being the dependable child, about being praised for strength while being starved of presence, about being told not to be dramatic when something important was quietly taken away. I didn't name anyone. I didn't soften anything either. I posted the piece in a small online support group for adult children navigating family estrangement. The responses came slowly at first, then faster. This happened to me. I thought I was crazy for being hurt by this. Thank you for putting words to it. A week later, Dr. Lawson knocked on my office door. You write? He said, holding his phone. I stiffened. I do. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. You understand the difference between story and spectacle. I try to. I said, good. He replied, because people will try to make your truth about them. He was right. An email arrived from a mental health publication asking to reprint my essay anonymously. I agreed. I didn't tell my family. I didn't feel the need to. The calls started 2 days later. First my mother, then my father, then Julian. I let them ring. A text finally came through from my mother. People are saying awful things. I stared at the screen, then typed back. I didn't say anything awful. Another message followed. Your brother is losing clients. I set my phone down and finished my notes from the day. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment. Laptop open. Comments still appearing beneath my words. For the first time, my story wasn't being minimized. It wasn't being reframed. It wasn't being used to protect anyone else. It existed as it was. And so did I. My mother left 3 voicemails before I listened to any of them. Her voice had changed. It wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't dismissive. It was tight, hurried, afraid of something slipping out of reach. Margot, she said in the first message, we need to talk. This has gone too far. In the second, her tone shifted. People are talking about us, about your father, about Julian. The third was quieter. Please call me back. I waited a full day before answering, not to punish her, to make sure I didn't confuse urgency with importance. We agreed to meet halfway, in a cafe near the train station. Public, neutral, no place to raise voices without witnesses. When I walked in, my parents were already there. My mother stood as if to hug me. I didn't move. She sat back down. You look tired, she said. So do you. I replied. My father didn't bother with small talk. We didn't raise you to do this, he said. To do what I asked. To air family business in public, he said. You've made us look cruel. I didn't make you anything, I said. I described what happened. My mother leaned forward. You left out context. I included timing. I said, that was the context. She pressed her lips together. Your brother's work is suffering. Clients are stepping back. Sponsors are asking questions. I nodded once. I'm aware. So you're just going to let this happen? My father asked. I didn't start it. I said. I stopped hiding it. That's not fair. My mother said, families forgive. I forgave you years ago. I replied. I just stopped waiting. My father's voice hardened. You could have come to us. I did. I said, every time you told me not to be dramatic. Silence stretched between us. My mother's hands shook as she reached for her cup. What do you want from us now? I want nothing, I said. That's the point. She looked stricken. We're still your parents. You're my history, I said, not my authority. I stood, gathered my coat, and placed a folded paper on the table. My updated professional listing, Dr. Margot Ellis. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about alignment. My father stared at the paper. My mother stared at me. I hope you figure out how to live with the truth, I added. I finally have. I walked out before they could respond. Weeks later, I attended a small graduation at the clinic, One of my patients had completed a program she once thought she would never finish. I sat in the front row and clapped until my hands hurt. She saw me. She smiled. If this story resonated with you, if parts of it felt uncomfortably familiar, you're not alone. Sometimes hearing someone else say it out loud is the first step toward choosing yourself. I went home that night to a quiet apartment. My name on the door. My life arranged by my own decisions. No applause followed me there. No approval waited in the next room. That was the peace.